All right.
What's up, guys? Dylon here, and today we are talking the Ibis Exie for all. This is the NGX build behind me. So, comment, share, subscribe, and let's get into this video. So, I want to talk about my experience with this Exie, what I think about it, the pros, the cons, who it's for, and just give some insights after owning this thing. So, I bought this thing about a month ago. I have about 100 miles on this, so a decent amount. And I've ridden mostly around here in Eagle, Colorado. And a lot of the trails are smooth climbs, good cross-country style riding, but there are some longer, a little more technical descents that I've been on with this thing. And let's first start out with the reason why I got it, what bike I came off of, a little bit about myself, and then go into some of the pros and the cons. I'm 6 foot, 200 pounds, I'm athletic, and I lift weights, I ski, I snowboard, so I'm pretty fit for this bike. And I'm coming off of a Ripmo AF bike, which it was a size large. It weighed around the bike weighed around 34 pounds for that size large Ripmo AF. I got that last spring, so spring of 2022, rode it last season, and then rode it the beginning of this season, that Ripmo AF. And that was a great bike. It pedaled well, it went downhill. Overall, just a fantastic bike. It handled everything I could throw at it. But the big thing that was lacking on that bike that I wanted more of was I just wanted the bike to be a little bit lighter. I definitely felt that 34 pounds when I was doing a lot of the climbs and trails around here at Eagle. Now, part of that was due to just like me being out of biking shape, but when I look at the times on Strava, when I compare it to what I'm able to do on the Exie, looking back on it, there's just sections of the trails where that heavier bike just makes you feel a little more bogged down. It could still pedal well, but if you really want to get after it, but you really got to put a lot of power down through your legs, which zaps your energy when you're riding that bike. So you just didn't feel like you could push through the sections as fast as you wanted to without being in just like amazing biking shape, which there's nothing wrong with that. And so I started looking for a bike, and I want a bike that had probably a little less travel, that could climb well, that can basically be just about a do everything bike. And I was recommended this Exie. I was recommended by the local bike shops, people that own the bike, and I read a bunch of online reviews and then on top of that, I saw that Jensen USA and a couple online dealers were having a sale on these Exes. So instead of being like $5,000 because they're the old colors and they're the Exie for all build, they were, I think this one was 3750 and instead of 5K, something like that. And the Exie USA, which is their carbon frame made in the United States, which has the top of the line components, was way out of my price range for what I was looking for a bike. And so I was like, this looks great. I'm gonna do that, try it out and see what it does. Because what I wanted a bike that I could just take it out and ride, and I didn't have to worry about the climb. I could just do the climb, power that out, get more miles under my belt, and just have a little bit more fun. Where my Ripmo, I would always kind of worry about the climb. I'm like, ugh, the downhill's fun, biking's fun, but man, it is a chore doing the climb on the Ripmo. So I sold the Ripmo, got the Exie, and riding the Exie, it does climb a lot better. Like I could tell it's a lighter bike. It's a lighter, zippier bike, a little bit firmer with the suspension because it's less travel than that Ripmo. The Ripmo still pedaled really well. It still climbed well. It was a slower process. And with this Exie, I've set personal bests on just about every single segment of the trails that I ride here, both uphill and downhill. I think there's only one downhill section that I was really feeling it on the Ripmo and I haven't beat with the Exie, but I'm close, right? Within a few seconds. So this bike is extremely capable both uphill and downhill, especially the uphill. Like this thing climbs great. When you're really pushing, when the hill's steep and it requires that energy, it just doesn't feel like it zaps as much of your energy versus something like the heavier bike like the Ripmo. The Exie feels like you can push through it and then continue going, where the Ripmo, you could push through it, but you might need a little break, okay? You might stop pedaling, catch your breath, let your legs loosen up just a little bit from that part of the climb. That's definitely something I feel with this Exie on those climbs. It handles the climbs just fine. A little bit of the technical sections, like there's a few steep technical sections on the trails that I ride. The Ripmo, I think, handled those a little bit better, just a little more traction on those sections versus the Exie. It's got that lower travel, a little stiffer. It's running these these Recon race wheels, which I think those are a con for this bike. I'll talk more about those in a minute. So it loses some of that traction. But again, the bike is fast. It allows you to ride hard. It allows you to ride most of the trails, most of trails in general. Like they're not all like super techy. They're not all with a bunch of bumps and stuff like that. In general, it depends on where you ride, but in general, you're gonna ride a decent, like just a packed trail, and this thing's gonna do great on that. Pros, less quick summary, the bike's light, right? It allows you to push through sections and keep on pedaling. It is allow me to set PRs on both the uphill and downhill times for it. It doesn't make you have to think about going out or have those, oh man, the climb's gonna suck. No, climbs are gonna suck in general when you mountain bike, but it sucks a lot less than even something like the Ripmo that is famed for how well it pedals for the type of bike that it is. Climbs are great, and downhills, it's more than capable on these downhills. And these are steep downhills with berms. If you know some of the trails around here at Eagle, they're not like the gnarliest techie downhills, but there there's some good long downhills. This thing does great, right? It's not, I don't feel like I'm gonna fly over the handlebars or anything like that. I can still hit it with good pace and good speed. Where the cons come in for this bike, and it's in line with the build kit on the bike, the nature of the bike, and then long technical downhills. So let's first talk about the long technical downhills, which makes sense, right? This is a cross country bike. So if you're doing downhills that are long sustained downhills, I'm talking ones that are like a real downhill, right? Where you pedal up and then you go down. And there's a lot of trails like that in Colorado. The problem with something like this XC that I've run into is where on the Ripmo I could just power through that downhill and have fun and absorbs all the stuff. I get a lot more vibrations. I get a lot more feedback through this XC. My hands are more likely to go numb with the XC. My feet, I feel it in my feet a little bit more. My body gets a little more shaken up going hard down the downhills. Where like, to really enjoy it, again, you got to be in really good shape. This is like to really enjoy the Ripmo climbing, you got to be in really good shape versus the XC, you can be in okay shape. But on the downhills, you got to be in really good shape and get your body really used to that. Or you're going to be stopping more than you want to on the downhills or on your brakes a lot more on the downhills, just because it does when you're going fast, it does, and you hit bumps and stuff like that, it can go through them and handle them. It just gets thrown off line a little bit more, and just all those vibrations add up over time. So if you're doing long sustained downhills, and that's one of my biggest complaints about this, is just like they're not quite as fun because they just put a lot of just feedback into your body that it makes you want to take a break. And pushing through it's fine. It's just you just get tired and fatigued, and that's not really a state that you want to be in when you're bombing down a downhill. You want to be on it, ready, prepared. You don't want your muscles to be cramping, your hands to be numb, and that kind of stuff. And I got a lot more of this from the XC, which is one of the reasons why I'm considering adding another bike and or selling this. I'm on the fence about selling it because I really love it, and I want to do some longer races, and it'd be perfect for that. But I want to get a longer travel bike so I can have a little bit more fun on those gnarlier downhills. So it doesn't do as well as something like Ripmo, but that's in its nature, that's expected. So how to improve that, how to make that better? And this comes down to the build kit. I think this is one of the biggest cons of this bike. And I think if you're gonna get this bike, I think I would really consider what things you have on hand, what type of riding you want, and what type of money you wanna spend. So with the builds, the NGX, the Dior, and SLX builds, those are all the builds that come on the XC for all. And I think it ranges, like right now you can get them online for $3,750 to $4,100 or something like that, plus tax and shipping, right? Because the old colors are on sale. But they're $5,000 to $5,500 otherwise. A decent spec for a carbon cross-country bike from Ibis that it is a great bike. But the problem with all those specs is, since this is a cross-country bike, the goal of this, and I played around with it, but I've asked feedback on Ibis forums and things like that, you don't want to make this bike heavier, okay? With a trail bike, even like with something like the Ripmo, you can beef it up to make it better for gnarlier trails, but you can also like slim it down to make it a little better for normal trail riding. Same thing with the Ripley, the AF or the carbon version. You can beef up the Ripley a little bit to make it a little bit better for the gnarly trails, and you can also like slim it down to make it a little bit better for the cross-country trails. You can go both directions and you'll be fine with either bike. With this XC, you really don't want to beef it up. I went and put some, it's already in this build, it's already a little more beefed up because it's got the aluminum wheels, it's got the slightly heavier cassette on there and group set because it's the lower end stuff. Still very capable and very good, but I put some heavier wheels on this, like a Dissector and a DHR2, just to test it out and see how it felt. And it felt like I was pedaling my Ripmo again, but with less travel and still the vibrations from the trail and all that kind of stuff. So while I increased the traction some, the comfort and the fun and descending and that kind of stuff didn't go up, and my pace up the hill was like marginally better than my Ripmo. So the Ripmo was still a little bit slower, but not slow enough to where like I'd want to be on the Exie doing it when it's beefed up versus something like the Ripmo. So immediately as you start beefing up this bike, you're basically on the wrong bike. Okay. So that's a problem because with the current set of components, I think they're great to get out and go ride, but I don't think they're quite light enough to like really get the full benefits of this bike. I think you're going to be like with something like a Ripley, you're going to get the best of both worlds. You're going to get a really good pedaling bike, and it's going to be good for trail, and like you can go either direction depending on your trails, and you're not going to have to compromise that much. With this version of the Exie, what it really needs is it needs some carbon wheels, some lighter, stiffer carbon wheels on it. It needs some different tires. These tires are fine, but slightly grippier tires. And I think really you want to pair those with the carbon wheels so you get the lighter effect there, especially in this rear end, this Recon Race. So maybe even just a normal Recon. There's some other types of tires out there that might be have to give a little bit more grip without compromising on the weight for this thing. So you need that. You probably want to replace this rear cassette. So that's why I say it doesn't matter if you get the SLX, the Dior, or the NGX build. The rear cassette, those all weigh similarly. And you're going to want to replace that to lose some weight there because those are all pretty heavy. The Garbaroo cassette was one that was recommended. It's cheaper than like the higher end Shimano or SRAM cassettes. Apparently performs just as well, but it's just as light as those. So you're going to want new wheels, okay? You're going to want a new cassette, and those are like 200, 300 bucks wheels. You could get some used ones for 1,000, or you can get some new ones for 2,000, 1,800. So right now, and then you probably want to replace your cranks to lighten those up a little bit as well with some carbon cranks. You're looking at, if you really want to do this, if you do it budget minded, you could probably get all those things. Some used cranks, a cassette in good condition, all that kind of stuff. You could probably spend 500 bucks on that. And then some used carbon wheels, probably $500 on the low end, $1,000 for a solid, decently not too old, not too used set. So you're looking at about 1,500 bucks that you need to put into this bike to really get the most out of it. And that's probably going to shave off 1 to 2 pounds on this bike. And then you could probably add some carbon bars because I mentioned the vibration on the downhill, right? Makes my hands go numb. And this could be a personal problem, but you might want to get some carbon bars. It came with aluminum bars, so that's 150 bucks there, and maybe some different grips. So that's 150, 175 bucks there for that setup. So you're spending anywhere between 1,000 if you're really good and you don't have any of this stuff lying around, but probably around $1,500 to $2,000 on this bike to get it to where it's really performing the way it should. So that takes that $3,750 for the cost of this bike. Let's just say $4,000 with taxes and shipping, and you add $2,000, you're at $6,000 for the bike. Okay, if you got that stuff lying around, carbon wheels and all that kind of stuff that you can put on there, that's great. You're going to be fine. But when you get in that $6,000 range, there might be some other bikes that you can compare to that. Or you are getting a used bike that someone had built up before, a used cross country, might make a lot more sense. Or even when they had sales on the Exie USA, I know it was quoted around $6,500 for that full Exie USA build, like factory, carbon wheels, and all that kind of stuff. Then you're in that territory, and I would say go to that bike over this one. I'm not saying it's a bad bike by any means. I'm just saying, in this build spec, it allows an entry-level cross-country build that you can get out and have fun and push yourself and ride hard and ride a lot of trails. It might not be the one bike quiver that you would want, and it creates a lot of other bike options that might be better suited for an all-around bike or even a cross-country style bike. I know when you start thinking about this and thinking that if you get this bike to really maximize it out of the box, you're going to need to put another $2,000 into the bike. Your budget, looking good at $3,750, right, or 4,000 bucks, starts to look less good when you realize that's going to be $6,000. And when you start looking at, okay, if I had a $6,000 budget, what type of bikes could I build? You could get a really nice Ibis Ripley, carbon Ripley, that does everything for that price, versus having a really nice XC version of the Exie that does the cross-country stuff really well, but leaves you wanting another bike. Love the bike. It's fantastic. It pedals great. It's still a ton of fun, but it makes you want another bike. And so when you see these builds on these ones, I don't think there's a problem necessarily. Just know that you're going to spend more money, right? It's not a one bike, one and done type of solution. you're going to want to spend more money on upgrading some of those components to make it lighter, to make it a little stiffer, to make it so it really brings out the XC benefits. And when you do that, it might be worth considering maybe buying a used cross-country bike or a used like Ibis DV9. I've seen people having those for sale for like 2,000 bucks and getting that as your cross-country bike instead of getting this plus all the extra stuff, and then having your full suspension. So you could basically go with a Ripmo AF or a Ripley AF, one of the two, and then get like a cross-country hardtail or a used cross-country bike for the cost of just one of these bikes, especially right now with a lot of mountain bikes on sale. Then you have two bikes that fulfill the needs. So you don't have to compromise as much for the same or less than you would fully kitting out the Ibis Exie. So those are some of my real takeaways on this bike. And just finally to conclude, like I've said a lot, like this bike, I love it. It's great. Ibis makes fantastic bikes. They do a great job. Their suspension's great. They spec their bikes well. They ride so well. Like this thing can handle a lot. So when I'm saying these things, it handles the downhills. Like I said, I've set PRs versus my Ripmo with this bike. I've set it on the up, the downs, the cross-country trails. I've broken almost all my records riding this bike versus the Ripmo. This bike gets me excited to ride uphill. I can feel I can do anything. I don't have to worry about riders passing me from behind. It gets me out there more, which is one of the things that I wanted. But when you're thinking about it from a one bike quiver, it does limit me. I don't want to go do the Monarch Crest Trail or like the Porcupine Rim Trail on this bike. Versus my Ripmo, I'd be all about doing some of those trails. This one, I don't want to necessarily do that. I don't want to necessarily do some of more the gnarly downhills with this bike, which isn't necessarily a problem, except that I want to do those things. So that requires me to have another bike or compromise on those downhills. And if you're in that situation, if you're only riding smooth cross-country trails and that style of riding, or you have a little bit less tech features for where you're at, this bike would be a great one bike. If you got a bunch of money, get this bike, upgrade it, add all those components, and get another bike too, right? Buy the Ibis Ripmo as well. Have those two bikes. If you got enough money and money's not a problem, fantastic bike, do that. If you're more budget-minded and you want to get two bikes for the price of one, what I recommend, like I said before, is I would look for a used cross-country bike that's a couple years old with good components, right? These ones are only a few years old, so there's not gonna be as many used ones on the market yet. But like an Ibis DV9, for those more smooth, that's a hardtail, but those things fly. For a smoother cross-country style riding, that thing would be fantastic. You can find those for $2,000 or less. There's definitely people out there that want to trade their cross-country bikes for ones with bigger suspensions. I would try to find a used one of those, 2,000, 3,000 bucks. And then I'd try to find like a used enduro style bike, 140 millimeter, 150 millimeter travel bike. You can find those again from 3 to 4K, really solid bikes. People are selling out there. So for anywhere between, if you really do it well, you could probably spend $5,000, get two bikes, two amazing bikes that cover all your bases so you can do anything for the cost of one. And I think that'd be the real solution if I was telling someone to buy a bike. If you want a one bike solution, right, to do just about everything, looking at an Ibis Ripley, I've seen some used ones on sale, some former demo ones, or just people selling those. An Ibis Ripley would be a fantastic bike, especially if you lean more to cross country, but you do still some NAR. That Ripley would be amazing. Or the Ibis Ripmo, if you lean a little bit more to the NAR and you do some of the cross country, that Ibis Ripmo, you can get some of those. And you could even, if you found a really good deal on that Ripmo, you could even buy a set of carbon rims for that thing and carbon wheels for $1,000, and you've lightened up your Ripmo, you stiffened it up as well, and you're going to get all the benefits of performance for that. So ultimately, fantastic bike. I like it. I'd still recommend it, just depending on your situation. I wouldn't give it a general, yes, go buy this, but for the right person, the right situation, this bike is fantastic. It's amazing. But at the end of the day, just get out there with what you have and ride and upgrade, change things, try things out as you go on and figure out what you like. So anyways, that is the Ibis Exie. If you want to learn more about this or if you want to buy this bike from me, mention that in the comments below and we can chat. That's it for now, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.